to Cooking with the Scientific Method. I am your chef, Mr. Bush, and today I will be teaching you about the scientific method. Little disclaimer though, guys, it's eerily similar to critical thinking, so be prepared. So the scientific method, for those of you that do not know, there are 7 steps in our scientific method. We are going to cover those before we light our oven. First step of the scientific method, you have to start with a question. So the beginning to every problem is that question. So whatever it is you're trying to figure out, ask. Today, our question that I'm going to be asking is, are chocolate chip cookies with more chocolate chips better than cookies with fewer chocolate chips? That's just going to be my example today. We will refer back to that as we kind of move along all these steps. And again, that's kind of how I will practice the scientific method with you. Number 2 is, after you come up with your question, research that question. Maybe there's already been a scientist that has asked the same question or a similar question and already has an answer, or maybe an experiment that can point you in the right direction to find the answer to your question. So before you waste any time coming up with an experiment, performing that experiment, do some research, see what's already been done. After you do your research, number 3, then you create a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess, and that is essentially you creating an answer for that question. So what do you think is going to happen, or what do you think is going to be the answer to that question? My hypothesis is, today, I believe that I like the chocolate chip cookies with more chocolate chips. I like chocolate, so I'm assuming, I'm guessing, I'm hypothesizing that the cookies with more chocolate chips I will like more than the cookies with fewer chocolate chips. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is, now we test that hypothesis, or we have an experiment. We really can't answer any scientific questions without performing a test, without performing an experiment. And today that experiment will be the process of baking those cookies. Again, it will look different based on whatever field of science you're in, whatever question you have asked, and whatever it is you may be trying to find out. Some tests and experiments are a lot more exciting than other tests and experiments. It really just depends on what it is you're trying to find out. So we've tested, or we've had our experiment. Now we are moving to number 5. And number 5 is making your observations. So as that test was being performed, what did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? Other observations could be checking and looking over those numbers, which we'll get to here in a second. But really, your observations are just things that you can see, observe, hear, and smell. Today, my observation is not a normal observation, because in science you don't typically eat or taste anything, but my observation today will be eating those cookies. So we've made our observations. That allows us to go then to step number 6, is analyzing our data, analyzing our observations. So what does this mean? Well, really, whenever you're analyzing something, you are trying to figure out what it is that means. So what do the numbers from your test results mean? In my case, what does my kind of, I guess, senses from my tongue to my brain, that signal there, what does that give me? I mean, maybe I'll find out that I like the chocolate chip cookies with fewer chips than I hypothesized. So what does your data mean? Does it match your hypothesis? Why or why not? Does it not match your hypothesis? Why or why not? So really, you were just trying to figure out if your data matches your hypothesis to your question. And then once you have analyzed your data, number 7 is, no matter what, it is always important to share your results with other scientists. Again, this allows you to get feedback from other people that may have done something similar that you weren't able to find in your research. And then possibly it could allow you to help another scientist that's dealing with a similar issue, but maybe from a different angle you approach something. So it could be very beneficial to share your results. So those are the 7 steps of the scientific method. Now let's get baking. All right, now that we've covered the 7 steps of the scientific method, I'm going to put those into motion for you guys here, so you can kind of see again what all those 7 steps are. And for a scientist, and in this case, my science here is baking. Again, just seeing how they look, how we will use the scientific method in class and how you'll use it moving forward. So again, number one, we started with our question. My question was, am I going to like chocolate chip cookies with fewer chocolate chips, or am I going to like chocolate chip cookies with more chocolate chips? So that was step number one, and that is our question part. And so here I picked up all my materials. I have my chocolate chips, so we're good to go there. Number two is the research part. This one here, the example is a little loose just because my research would have just been me asking myself if I like cookies. I do, that's why I chose this as my example. Your research later on, again, like I explained, will be used to help you guys understand if the question's been asked and answered before, what experiments and tests people have done. But for today, my research was, again, asking myself and knowing that I do indeed like chocolate chip cookies. And the third step, step number three, is to create an hypothesis. I hypothesized earlier that I was going to like the cookies with more chocolate chips than I do the cookies with fewer chocolate chips. So we've done steps 1, 2, and 3. Now we're on step number 4. And again, step number 4 is our test or experiment. Today our test is, and our experiment I should say, is the process of baking these cookies. Hopefully this is the first time I've done this, so hopefully they're edible, so that we can actually finish our test here. Anything like a test or experiment in science class, you have to have your lab notes. The procedure is what it is called. In this case, it is the recipe for the cookies. And so today, again, that is my procedure for this experiment. All right, so we now have to carry out step number 4. And so step number 4 is the process now of putting our ingredients together and baking those cookies. So my first step in my procedure is to preheat the oven to 375 degrees. I have already done so beforehand because it does take a little while here with my oven, so I've already got that taken care of. Step number 2 of our procedure is we're going to combine our Crisco, similar to butter. We're going to drop that in my bowl here, and then we also have 1 1/4 cup of brown sugar. I have them tightly packed into my measuring cups here. Add them to my bowl. I now need a tablespoon of vanilla and a tablespoon of milk. So I will get my vanilla open. Maybe. And then, like I said, I am doing 1 tablespoon of vanilla. I will dump that in. I also need to get my milk because then I have to do 1 tablespoon of white milk. I measure this out, and again, we will get practice with measuring once we get back in class. It is important that you measure for your experiments so that you keep everything consistent. Okay, so that is step number 2. We put everything in the bowl. Now we must mix it together on medium speed with my blender here. So that is what we will do. I'll get everything kind of mixed up. Make sure everything gets all mixed up nice and neat. All right, so I say nice and neat, but you want to make sure everything's all combined and mixed up. So then after we have mixed those together, we will add our egg. I will go ahead and do so. And then we'll drop our egg in there. Wash off my hand. And then again, we will mix these all together. All right, so we've carried out steps 1, 2, and 3 of our procedure. So we've mixed all those together. Now we're going to continue with step number 4. I have broken these down a little bit, but step number 4 is essentially adding in more ingredients and mixing them. So we have our 1 3/4 cup of flour. I'm going to go ahead and add. All right, very good. And then we will add I believe it is 1. Ooh, I need to add another tablespoon of milk. Oh well, I can go ahead and do that. I will eyeball it. So we'll add our salt. I didn't write down all of my notes correctly. That is another important thing as well. So I add my, teaspoon of salt. I will add 3/4 cup, or 3/4 teaspoon, of baking soda. Struggling here. The milk threw me off. So I'll have to get some more and add that. So I have a 1/4 teaspoon scoop here. So I'm doing 3 1/4 scoops of our baking soda. Okay, so I added in our flour, I added in our salt, and I added in our baking soda. Because I did make a mistake, good thing I caught it early, I do need to add another tablespoon of milk, and I have put that spoon right there. All right, there we go. Caught my mistake. Should have triple checked all of my steps. Okay, so now again, we have added everything into the bowl. We're continuing to mix it. Now remember guys, we're still on step 4 of the scientific method. We are doing our test or experiment in this part, and this is what step number 4 consists of. That is what really a lot of people think of science is the experiment part, but really that is only the 4th step of the entire, journey that a scientist takes into finding a solution, answering a question, and things like that. So we are still in step number 4 of the scientific method, but this could possibly be one of the longer steps. Again, making sure everything gets mixed up here. Alright, so now I have everything mixed up in our mixing bowl. So now our next process is, we're at the point where we have to determine our chocolate chip count. And so, going back and referring to the question, I like cookies with fewer chocolate chips, or I like cookies with more chocolate chips. Okay, so right now, we don't have any chocolate chips in our mixing bowl. So I'm going to open up those chocolate chips. I'm going to add just a small amount, get them kind of mixed in, and lay out my cookies. So for the procedure here, we just finished our number 4. That is, again, making sure everything is mixed up and together. So I'm just going to add very few chocolate chips. I will show you. Again, we have very few chocolate chips. I even dropped one on the floor here in our bowl. Okay, so again, do some mixing, making sure that they get spread out a little bit here, because there are very few chocolate chips in this entire bowl. Okay, so now that I've got those chips mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and lay out a few cookies. I'm going to continue to use my same spoon here. I don't have, really, in my opinion, an ice cream scooper would have been ideal. Scoop it up and plop in. I don't have that. I'll just continue to use my spoon and kind of eyeball the cookie size I want. That's kind of the nice thing here. I can kind of as I please. So again, just making a couple of cookies here with a few chocolate chips. So I'll go ahead and I will get a couple more of these made, and then we will move on to adding more chocolate chips so that we can then compare our results. Okay, so I have 3 cookies with few chocolate chips. Now I'm going to go ahead and add more to our bowl. Now hopefully I don't add too many. That is what we may run into. Again, I will show you the difference here. We have way more chocolate chips in our bowl now than what we did prior. So for the sake of everything, once again, I will go ahead and mix these all up. Okay, so we've completed step number 5 of our procedure. That is adding the chocolate chips to our dough. So now I will scoop out some of these. And get them on the pan. Again, some of these are going to be a lot different in size because I don't have a consistent scoop. Okay, I can get a couple more on my pan and then we'll get these started. Alright, so in our procedure, in our recipe, we have completed step number 5, like I said. We added the chocolate chips, we moved on to number 6, and we put the cookies on our cooking pan. Now, step number 7, we have to put them in the oven for about roughly 9 to 11 minutes. So I am going to go ahead and do so. Get my timer set. And we will let them cook. Okay, so the cookies are now done. So I'm going to show you guys the difference between my cookie with few chips and my cookie with a lot of chips, just because there is a visual difference. Because now, guys, we have moved into step number 5 of the scientific method. We are making observations. And so again, I will show you our cookies. The cookie here is the cookie with few chips, and the cookie that my thumb is holding up is the cookie with a lot of chips, okay? And so then, like I had mentioned earlier, this is the first time baking cookies. So one thing that we had to observe is, are these edible? And to the naked eye, they do look edible. So we can then move on with our experiment here. That takes us to number 5 and number 6. Again, number 5 is making your observations. We have observed our cookies, made sure everything seemed to go all right in this case. Making observations later on, again, involves what color changes do you see? Do you smell anything? Those are looking at your numbers and graphs. So those are observations as well. Now, number 6 is analyzing the data and then creating a conclusion. So today, to analyze that data, I just have to eat the cookies. Later on, analyzing the data is you as a scientist figuring out what it is your results from your test or experiment actually mean. So again, today, my analysis is just eating these cookies. I will start with a bite of the cookie with fewer chips, and then I'll take a bite of the cookie with more chips. I will give you my conclusion, and then I will move on to step number 7, and that is to share my results with you guys, which I will kind of do in the process here of analyzing my data. Okay, so again, first cookie, very few chocolate chips. I'll give it a try. If I were to guess, there maybe are 1 or 2 chips in this entire cookie. So we'll give it a go. Not bad. Not as good as my mom's cookies, but they're edible, that's for sure. Later when I add some milk in, they'll be really good. So yeah, overall, for me personally here, maybe a little bit too much cookie and not enough chip. So I will then take a bite of the cookie with a lot of chips again here to see again if my preference is more chips or fewer chips. I do have to say, the cookie with more chocolate chips, based off of the one bite that I took between the two, I did like the cookie with more chips more, simply because it was just slightly softer, a little bit more gooey. Again, both cookies are good, but if I had a preference, and in this case I do, my hypothesis was that I would like the cookies with more chocolate chips more than the cookies with fewer chocolate chips. Okay, so like I said, step number 6 was analyzing our data. That was eating our cookies. I did analyze that I did like the cookie with more chips more than the cookie with fewer chips. And so that is kind of the process of step number 7 of the scientific method, is sharing your results, and that is indeed what I just did. I shared with you guys that I thought the cookie with more chips, and my idea, my preference, was better than the cookie with fewer chips. Again, a different example, but we did get to see the scientific method in process today. We will be using this moving on forward throughout the school year here, depending on what it is we are doing. But again, welcome to the scientific method and welcome to science class.